This is the third session in the Feminism and its Discontent strand, the title of it being The Battle Over Breasts. My name is Dr Ellie Lee, and I'm the director of a research centre at the University of Kent called the Centre for Parenting Culture Studies. One aspect of the battle over breasts was a foundational research interest for those of us who set up the Centre for Parenting Culture Studies, and indeed is how I know one of our panellists, Blum, to start with. Myself and colleagues were involved in a piece of research over a decade ago now, which engaged in the debates about feeding babies and the particular battle about breasts and bottles, which I'm sure everybody knows characterises that debate, which has become a particularly moralised, politicised and often very heated argument about how mothers should feed their babies. So that's part of the backdrop to today's discussion. I suppose if there's one question that I think we might want to have at work when we're discussing, it's whether claims made for the importance of breasts in public and the alleged political contribution of breasts in public, what we make of those claims. Those claims attract official endorsements. There's an email doing the rounds of some academics at the moment being sent around by a PR agency called Freud's, who are in the employ of the Department of Health and who are designing on the behalf of the Department of Health a campaign to advocate for public breastfeeding and to say this is something that women should feel comfortable about, should do more of. And what they're specifically looking for is for academics to give them quotes, I suppose, to give a kind of expert seal of approval to this particular aspect of the advocacy of breasts in public. So that's one part of it. But of course, the other parts of it that have been going on while we were thinking about this discussion have been other kinds of campaigns advocating for public breasts and for toplessness. One example is Free the Nipple. How many people here, everybody must know does anybody not know about freeing nipples? Well, this is an equality movement. That's how it describes itself, that uses social media and film to fight against censorship laws in the US, where it's illegal in 37 states for women to appear topless. And so we have now a whole load of celebrities posting Instagram images of their nipples as part of Free the Nipple. There is also an initiative called Go Topless Day. There was a semi-naked parade through New York City earlier in the year, and Rachel Jesse, an actress and model who leads the Go Topless group in New York City, explained that topless campaigners want women to have the same right as men to go topless in public. And so you now have quite a lot of women, again, also particularly celebrities, walking around with just a skirt on and no t-shirt, because guys can do this in the summer, so women should too, and that this is a blow for equality. So that's certainly one thing that we want to have a look at. Something I find particularly interesting about it is that when I was in my 20s, lots of us went topless when we were sunbathing, mainly because we didn't want the strap lines. I mean, it was to do with wanting a nice suntan, and I certainly didn't perceive it as a political activity. It was more to do with vanity. I think probably these days fewer young women do go topless on beaches, but we have this Go Topless campaign instead. Anyway, so that's the kind of terrain. Our panel is first of all Linda Blum. Linda is over in the UK at the moment as a visitor to our research centre at Kent, mainly to talk about her new book, which isn't on this topic. It's called Raising Generation RX, Mothering Kids with Invisible Disabilities in an Age of Inequality. And it's a very interesting sociological study, well worth a read. So that's mainly why Linda's here. But Linda's previous book was called At the Breast. And it was because of her writing that book that I got to know Linda, because she came over to Kent a decade ago to discuss that book with us. So I'm delighted to welcome her back. Our second panellist is Amy Brown, who is an associate professor in public health at Swansea University and a researcher into breastfeeding. Then Laura Dodsworth, who is a photographer. Laura is the author of Bare Reality, 100 Women, Their Breasts, Their Stories. This is Jan Macvarish, who is a colleague of mine from the University of Kent, and a founding associate with me of the Centre for Parenting Culture Studies. So let's just say hello to our panel. Okay, so they're each going to introduce the topic for a few minutes, and then we'll have a discussion. Linda.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here today from the U.S., so I'm going to be bringing a U.S. perspective. And I want to really thank Ellie and Jan for putting together this great panel, and we've been having some great email exchanges too to get our thoughts kind of revving up. So I think it's a really important question, who owns women's breasts? Today we might say there are many pieces. We're in pieces: media, corporations, husbands, partners, babies, the medical profession, the state, competing feminist claims, or women ourselves. And everyone has a piece. But it's a question I was thinking and writing a lot about, as Ellie said, as I was researching beliefs and practices of breastfeeding among very diverse U.S. women. It's a very easy issue to trivialize or sensationalize, which I found was not pleasant as an academic. And it often has been in the past. So I thought what I would do quickly today is give you a bit of historical view from the US. Because again, in my view, these campaigns to free the nipple or to breastfeed in public, or about body issues in general, women's bodies against ideals of perfect, slim, toned bodies, they're not really new. And they have some, and all of them, I think, have some positive significance. They all represent long efforts on the part of women for bodily autonomy, to take ownership of our bodies, of our reproductive, maternal, and sexual selves as a basis of our rights as democratic citizens. Now, in the modern era, in the broadest sense of the term, if we're thinking back all the way to the Enlightenment, property rights in one's own person, private property began actually in one's own body, and it was considered the essential basis of citizenship. So if you go back and look at John Locke, he has a great deal to say about that. And that, of course, at that time, the basis of the right, that time only white Christian men, this was the basis of the right to fully participate in the public sphere, the economy, the polity, to serve one's country in the military and in manly labor. Now, in the first wave of feminism, in the 19th century and the early 20th century, it was, again, easy to trivialize as women began to advocate for full citizenship rights, and women's campaigns included body rights. So there was a lot of ridicule of the dress reformers. In the US, the most famous was Amelia Bloomer, for whom then the name of those loose sort of pantaloons, she earned that name, and also was to really get out of the corsets and confining clothing to be able to sort of move around in the public world and breathe so one could have a voice. But other feminists at that time also disagreed, and it was controversial even among feminists because it was thought a real distraction, which it proved to be in the media at that time, from bigger objectives like the vote. Then in the early 20th century, campaigns for body rights could be viewed as completely immoral. So in the US, we had, like Margaret Sanger's efforts to make contraception available. And she once wrote that each woman should be the absolute mistress of her own body, and promoted women's right to sexual pleasure as well as to birth control. And she's still a notorious figure, really, in the US. These are contested ideas, even today, as recent attacks in the US against Planned Parenthood demonstrate. A century later, campaigns for women's body rights were also trivialized and sensationalized in second wave feminism. The US, you might have heard of, how many have heard of bra burners? Yeah, right. And you know that actually never happened. There was an incident at the 1968 Miss America pageant, but actually it was only a Freedom trash can. They actually couldn't light a bonfire, because it's on an old wooden boardwalk on the beach in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So they had just a trash can, and they did toss in bras, but also many other things, cosmetics, high heels, Playboy magazine, so on. They also crowned a live sheep winner of their beauty pageant. So it was in many ways in the style of the other kinds of political theater, ZAP actions, they were called, right, of the important anti anti-Vietnam War movement of the time. It actually became framed as bra burning and somehow this focus on the breast, as it was likened to the anti-war burning of draft cards at the time as a dramatic protest gesture, not as something meant to be literal. But for feminism, then, it became layered over with really negative stereotypes of ridicule, of man-hating, really that echoed right back to the stereotypes of first-wave feminists as, spinsters, man-eaters, and so forth. Similarly, today's young women, still seeking full sexual subjectivity and rights over their bodies, can be ridiculed and their efforts sensationalized. We can see this amply demonstrated as a third-wave feminist issue in panels this weekend. I guess the heated discussion, which I had to miss, about rape culture this morning. But it's very prominent in the US right now, the anti-sexual assault movements on college campuses. They've received a huge amount of attention, some of it respectful even from the White House, the US Obama administration. But much of it is very negative. Much of it also misunderstands the kind of political theater involved and the protest politics that are not meant to be literal. So, for example, things like slut walks. Also, the Columbia University, the theatrical gestures of the Columbia University student Emma Sulkowicz in New York City, who dragged a mattress around campus with her and through her graduation ceremony this past spring to protest the university's lack of action to even investigate her allegations of sexual assault. Although they're a violation of U.S. anti-discrimination laws and equal education opportunity law. Certainly, I would say there is a new dimension, though, to this third-wave feminist activism. Like the Free the Nipple campaign, which has been prominent on Facebook, or conflicts over mothers' right to post pictures of themselves breastfeeding on Facebook and Instagram and other media, new media, social media and incessantly visual culture ramps up the level of attention and conflict. But in researching my book on breastfeeding at the breast, we can also see that these instances of denial of women's bodily presence in public spaces are remarkably persistent. Though in many ways, such campaigns like the lactivists, the nurse-ins in public spaces, are not entirely acts of bodily autonomy if we consider the nation-state's interest in public health, the inflated claims of the magic of breast milk in many public health campaigns in both the US and the UK. There's in a sense also a part that's being a compliant maternal citizen. But nonetheless, we seem particularly disturbed by acts that appear transgressive and do not keep strictly separate the heterosexual breasts from the maternal breasts. And this happens again and again, and I found this back through the 20th century quite consistently. So some recent examples. 2012, there was outrage over a Time magazine cover photo in the US. And I wish that we had PowerPoint so I could show this all to you. But just to describe it, it doesn't quite evoke how it's sort of shocking that there's a very attractive, very thin, very blonde mom in skinny jeans, very skinny jeans, and a black tank top, partially exposed breast but no nipple, because her son's on it. He's standing on a stool and nursing, and he's 3 years old, and I think he's kind of a big 3-year-old boy. Notably, she received death threats, though also some support. In Britain, I understand last year, in 2014, there was an amount of vitriol and a huge online response after a breastfeeding mom was asked to leave a sporting goods store. Some of it was protesting in her favor, supporting her, but most of it was supporting the store management, that what she was doing was quite obscene and disgusting. We're even more disturbed, I've argued, by breasts that transgress the boundaries of gendered citizenship, as in the case with which I began my 1999 book, At the Breast, of a U.S. military mom who wanted to renege after officer training. She wanted to leave the military to breastfeed exclusively, to practice attachment parenting, which is an odd term, right, because it's mothering. And longer than a short U.S. maternity leave allowed. So they insisted she pay back the full cost of her training. And in a 2014 British case, we can also see this in comments online, where breastfeeding moms were accused, in public, were accused of not being productive members of society. So again, transgressing that gendered citizenship, because there's a difference between a productive body and a reproductive body. Now, I just want to close by saying in the US, these are protests primarily of women already with a great deal of social privilege, of social class privilege and race privilege. And not that this is altogether a bad thing, because in some ways, perhaps you have to have that privilege to take the risks. But it does leave a problem when it becomes, I think, for me, it becomes a problem when it becomes a moral absolute by which privileged women reassert and reinforce their boundaries of privilege on the bodies of other women. That is, if breastfeeding can be a lovely choice under good circumstances, if a fully wanted experience, and perhaps also going topless and freeing the nipple, though it's not my choice. I'm maybe too old and I worry too much about sunburn. But it's also, I think we have to see contradictory and also acts of privilege. And it's not okay if it becomes prescriptive for all women without thought to the impact this may have, particularly on marginalized women. In the US, women of color, working class lone mothers, and lower income women are always more vulnerable to harsher public scrutiny and state surveillance. And if you just think about actually the response to many photos recently of Serena Williams, you can kind of get a sense of this. The response is often very, very negative to her appearance in photos. And you can see what the reaction might be if she were to free her nipples or to breastfeed in public. So in terms of breastfeeding moms, I think it's remarkable how in the US public health breastfeeding campaigns come down hardest on the most marginal women. And again, with very overinflated claims of the health benefits. So I think those women with privilege need to be a bit more honest about the contradictions inherent in their body breast campaigns, the ways they're both emancipatory and yet are not at the same time. But my brand of feminism, I guess, I think the way as a sociologist I look at social movements is that we benefit in the end from many voices, some more provocative than others, and less strategic. And so I would be also somewhat accepting of imperfect actions and of some degree of contradiction in this long haul and our lurching progress for bodily autonomy. Thank you.
Amy.
Okay, I actually want to pick up on something that Linda talked about there. The word contradiction. It is throughout this breastfeeding, this public breast debate. Now, I am going to come at this slightly from the breastfeeding angle, given my research and given my background, but I don't want to come at it at an angle of is breast is best. What I want to look at is how does this public claim to women's breasts actually damage the women who want to breastfeed? Breastfeeding in public is in and out of the news. Then we have arguments about page 3. Should women be able to expose their breasts in a newspaper, in a magazine? Should they be able to expose their breasts walking down the street? And within it, it just seems that this contradiction, this inconsistency in people's attitudes plays across all of it. Now, one of the things within it is the context of the breast. As a society, we seem to think we can claim women's breasts, we can talk about them, we can judge them, we can write about them in the newspapers. And I don't think there is part of a man's body that is up for so much scrutiny in the same way. Now, when you think about the public breast debate, it seems that when we think about breasts, even though they are completely multifunctional, like lots of other parts of the body, the idea is the breast as sexual is just at the forefront of our minds. And I would argue that the breast as sexual and should women breastfeed in public are two completely separate debates. You should not be talking about them in the same sentence. Breastfeeding a baby in public is not about the breast. It's not about the woman. It's about the baby. It's about the baby feeding. It's about the baby eating because it needs to eat. We have made it about the breast. We have made it about women and their decisions and their emotions. No, it's just a baby feeding. So we take this sexual idea of breasts and we transfer it whenever we seem to see a breast and talk about it. We don't do that for other parts of the body. There are lots of parts of the body that people can find sexual, that can be used in sexual activity. But for some reason, we can differentiate for those. I was thinking the other day about the mouth. The mouth can be used in so many different contexts and ways for feeding. I mean, if you're ill, vomiting, it can be used in sexual pleasure. But we don't think when we see people's mouths, oh, that's all about sex. No, it's just people talking. It's people eating. It's what they're doing. So the first idea is this concept of context. Why do we consider a breast to be sexual whenever we see it? If you look at the statistics, the general population kind of view is that more people are in favour of breasts as page 3 and being shown in a sexual way than are supportive of breastfeeding in public. It's a pretty shocking statistic that we're fine to see it in a sexual way, but actually we don't want to see it in a non-sexual way because it reminds us of sex. So breasts are all right to be sexual as long as they're being used for sex, but not when they're not. The second one is the inconsistency in all these arguments. Yes, there's the breastfeeding argument, but then there's the argument, page 3 is okay, oh no, page 3 is not okay, we're going to ban it from university campuses because it's going to offend people, and all these female students are going to be really, really upset by it. In the same vein, that generation are on Facebook using campaigns centred around their breasts to presumably somehow solve breast cancer. Apparently by writing the colour of your bra on Facebook and telling everybody about your underwear and your breasts, that's raising breast cancer awareness. So it's all right to do it if it's fun. My other argument is that actually when it comes to trying to support breastfeeding and fight back against this idea that we shouldn't show breasts in public, some of the campaigns actually make the situation a whole lot worse. If you think about the argument, Linda talked about examples where women are told to stop breastfeeding in public because it's indecent and we don't want to see that. So what we actually want is a society where breastfeeding is really, really boring, normal. Nobody thinks about it, it's just a baby feeding. No one even bats an eyelid. But what campaigners will do is actually sensationalise the whole thing. They'll have breastfeeding sit-ins. They'll splash it all over the newspaper. And yes, they might be showing their right to breastfeed, and they might be emphasising that to everybody. But what they're also doing is drawing attention to it, and they're drawing the criticism to it. And I would argue that they're only supporting those who already are quite positive about breastfeeding, who already feel fairly confident. The average person who is like, I don't know about breastfeeding, will look at that and probably think, what are they doing? I'd argue to some level the Free the Nipple campaign is arguing that women's nipples should be normal. They should just be commonplace. You should be able to see them everywhere. But it uses sensationalist methods to try and tell people that. So they're completely contradicting what they're trying to do. Do we want to sensationalise breasts? Do we want everyone to notice breasts? Or actually, do we just want them to be really, really boring? The added thing with the boring is then that this war that goes on between mothers about breast and bottle, and between them, they're actually igniting it even further, which is what the media wants, which is, I'd argue, what formula companies want. You have two sides who feel equally picked on. So you have a slight to breastfeeding mothers that someone wasn't allowed to breastfeed in public. My argument would be that, well, you'd solve that by women going out and breastfeeding in public just normally, showing it's natural, nothing to think about. In fact, we just sensationalise it and have all this support for breastfeeding. It's all over the press. And what happens is that the mothers who are then formula feeding think, well, hang on a minute, I'm doing a really good job too. You're saying you're proud. Aren't I allowed to feel proud too? So then they have a backlash. And they talk about how breastfeeding doesn't matter. And in fact, all we're doing is really having this war on two sides when the main message is babies being fed, babies being happy, mothers being confident. And instead of just being left alone to feed our babies how we want to feed our babies, using whatever we want, we're drawing all the media attention and sensationalising it. So I think that would be my last sentence, really. We need to make breasts more boring if we want to reduce all this attention on them.
Thanks.
You can't be in it. Think about your husband. All of his business colleagues will see your breasts. How will it affect your business? That's what one male friend said to me when I told him I was thinking about taking part in my project, Bare Reality, 100 Women, Their Breasts, Their Stories. You can't be in it. Think about your sons. They will be so embarrassed because all of their school friends will see your breasts. That's what another male friend said to me when I told him I was going to take part in my project, Bare Reality. So I had to consider that not only might it be personally embarrassing or feel vulnerable for me if I had a picture of my breasts alongside my story in my book, I had to take on board that my breasts might be inconvenient or possibly even dangerous to the men in my life. In the end, as the photographer and the author, I decided I had to stand shoulder to shoulder with the 100 other women who took part in the project. Those male friends weren't alone. Sometimes getting Bare Reality published has felt like a series of censorship roadblocks. From Facebook, who put me on the social media naughty step over and over and over for sharing images of breasts, to the male art curator who said that Bare Reality was too controversial and distracting for his space. Although I ask if you've ever been into many art galleries and not seen breasts. So, why? Breasts are primarily for feeding babies. They can be erogenous. They can be sexually significant attributes, although the degree depends on the culture. Sometimes women love their breasts. Sometimes women hate their breasts. They can mean life or death. 1 in 8 women in the UK will have breast cancer. But saying that, for the most part, mine just exist on my chest, not causing any particular trouble or excitement. It's because of the significance they carry in our culture that I felt compelled to create Bare Reality, but I was interested in what they mean to us, the owners of our breasts. What stories can we tell through our bodies? Breasts are catalysts for conversations about growing up, sexuality, motherhood, feeding our babies, cancer, health, ageing, body image, the media, and more. Each woman bears her body and her story in Bare Reality with courage and humour and honesty and grace. But it's interesting that bearing our breasts and telling our stories is such a radical counter-narrative to popular culture and media. When I was a little girl, my dad had a pink satin cushion with a topless photograph of the page 3 model Sam Fox. I don't know, I can't really see you all, I don't know what age you are. Does everyone know who Sam Fox is? Okay, so she was a very famous page 3 model from The Sun. Now, this cushion fascinated me, but it also intimidated me, and it remains a very vivid childhood memory. And that iconic image was reinforced by wider culture as I grew up. You can see breasts everywhere, billboards, TV, internet, but in real life, they are taboo and hidden away. Now, there used to be a pair of bare breasts on page 3 of The Sun every day, and you could sit in a cafe or any public space, and you could look at those breasts on page 3, and society would tolerate it beautifully. But if you were to sit there, topless, and look at page 3, well, women have been imprisoned and incarcerated in mental hospitals for being topless in public. Not in the UK that I know of, but many instances around the world. There are constant debates and contestations over female toplessness or top freedom, trivial, first world feminist problem, or deeply significant of sexist attitudes. The Tunisian woman, Amina Tyler, posted a topless photograph of herself with the words in Arabic, "My body is mine and not the source of anybody's honour." A fatwa was issued asking for her to be punished with 100 lashes and stoned to death. She was imprisoned. How does one pair of breasts cause such widespread offence and moral outrage? Whose honour was she referring to? Why did my male friends think first and foremost of the men in my life when I asked them what the effect of my breasts on my body would be in my book? I think the heart of the issue is control. Women's bodies are policed in ways that men's aren't. The question is not how much of our bodies we choose to reveal, but who decides whether we can reveal them, where, and how. Let's take Facebook as one example. They've relaxed their rules so that photographs of breastfeeding and mastectomy is permitted. So this is great. So if a baby is hanging off one breast or her breast has suffered from having cancer, you can have the photographs on Facebook. But why do communities of some women trump the rights of communities of other women? I think this only represents a positive step if it's followed by a greater relaxation in policing women's bodies. Facebook is awash with porn and sexually suggestive content, and banning nipples hasn't done anything to resolve that. Not safe for work, NSFW. That's a label that will be applied to a picture with a woman's nipples. Really? How are women's nipples not safe when they're primarily for feeding babies? Playboy just announced it will no longer publish fully nude photographs of women. Does this mean a radical departure from endemic media sexism? No. As the chief exec of Playboy said, you're now one click away from every sex act imaginable for free. Perhaps Playboy has just been a victim of its own success. I'm privileged to have had over 100 very intimate, honest conversations with women about their breasts, their bodies, and their lives. They're aged from 19 to 101, sized AAA to K, and from all walks of life, from Buddhist nun to burlesque dancer. In creating Bare Reality, I simply wanted to say, this is how we look, this is how we feel. So I'd like to end my introduction to this debate with coming back to the personal, and I'm just going to read out a few titles of stories from the book so that you get an idea about some of the things women had to say about their breasts. I've got a great pair of melons. Eating wasn't for me anymore. It's worrying when you get padded and push-up bras for growing breasts. In our culture, you have to hide when you breastfeed. Large breasts are seen as amazing when actually they're in extreme pain. Breasts are an integral part of my identity as a woman. All boobs go south. They were so sensitive, it was like having two clitorises on my chest. My breasts aren't erogenous, in fact my nipples are numb. We're all trying to be the special K woman. Breasts are powerful, not submissive. Sport has changed my body image. I had plenty of unwanted attention in the typing pool. Every young person strives to be like the images in the magazines. I don't touch my breasts if I'm masturbating, it's all about speed these days. Most of the time, we don't realise how beautiful women are. It broke my heart when my daughter told me she had breast cancer. Breasts are like psychic baubles. Breasts are homing devices for men. We are goddesses, we create life. And finally, great liberation of the breasts needs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, so if I just want to start with a word association game. So if I say breast, what word or words come next? Feeding.
Breast is best.
Is best. Milk. Women. Female. Okay. Anything else? Implants. Okay. Bra. Okay. Nipple. But actually what follows after breast, if you Google breast, is most often cancer. So if you Google breast, I mean, this may be to do with the filtering of what else might come through on Google, but the thing that comes out, pages and pages are about breast cancer, or breast milk, or breastfeeding, but by far and above is breast cancer. And I think there's lots of different people staking a claim for what breasts ought to mean and who owns them. And I think they're not the same claims that have maybe been made for the previous century. And I think if we can do something today, I'd like to try and update our appreciation of who actually is doing the defining of what breasts mean. So just to run through some of the different voices, the most obvious kind of traditional one, if you like, are those voices that are concerned that for too long men have defined the meaning of breasts as sexualised objects, that they feel entitled to look at, comment on, or maybe even touch breasts without regard for the feelings or wishes of women. Now, this has often led to the demand that breasts should be covered up, or at least that certain depictions of breasts, such as page 3 or lads mags, should not just be hidden from view, but should possibly be withdrawn, banned, or destroyed. Now, this essentially locates the problem of breasts with the idea that men desire them, and that there's a delegitimising of men's desiring of breasts. That's one claim. Another is a set of voices that say that women need to develop a self-loving relationship with their breasts, that breasts are the key to women's self-identity and self-empowerment. They're what that make us special, feminine or womanly, not in reference to men, but for women's own sake. This has often led to women being encouraged to reflect on or to reveal their real breasts to one another or to the wider public, to counter the unrealistic or the idealised breast that is not authentically female. Contrary to this is the free the nipple perspective, I would say. And they're arguing that the breasts are not special. They're no big deal. They should be treated no differently when bared in public than the chest and nipples of a man. Free the Nipple are demanding the right for women to be topless in public, as people said, just like a man. Another lot say that breasts are special because they are vulnerable or even dangerous. And this is the Breast Cancer Association. Breasts are here, and it's a very, very dominant representation of breasts today, I would say, that goes right across from the idea that young women, as soon as they start to develop their breasts, should start to check them, to that women right across the board should be highly, highly aware of the potential time bomb of their breasts, because they're prone to disease and in need of greater medical attention, requiring regular checking for signs of disease by the woman, by professionals, by hand, eye, or machine. These breasts are potentially very unsafe and threatening to women's lives. And these breasts have become a rallying point for women to get together in solidarity against disease. And they're very, very popular. That's partly why representations of women wearing bras on moonwalks and the pink ribbons and all that kind of thing are just very, very popular amongst women of all ages. And yet another lot say that breasts are very, very special and they are essential to being a woman. But this time, rather than being dangerous, they're providers of health and well-being because they're meant for feeding babies. That is their natural function. So, and it's the final claim that I want to go on to talk a bit more about. So by and large, the people making these claims are women. You don't hear men involved in this set of claims making. And somewhat confusingly, they're often the same women making different claims at the same time or at different times. But I think what all these arguments share is the demand that we all reformulate our ideas about breasts so that we can develop a healthier relationship between men and breasts, women and breasts, and babies and breasts. So there's an idea that we need to have a kind of culture shift and that we all need to be engaged in this kind of process of mental reformulation. I want to concentrate on as I said, on the last type of breast claimers, the ones who talk about breastfeeding and babies, because I think these are the ones that are the most powerful. They have the full weight of national and international institutions behind them, with specific laws and policies designed to persuade more women to view their breasts as feeding vehicles for babies. So when it was reported last year that in the United Arab Emirates, a new child rights law was going to be introduced that entitled all babies to be breastfed for 2 years, there was understandable outrage over here. People raised the possibility that men could sue their wives for not breastfeeding, and that maybe even children could sue their mothers for not breastfeeding them when young. Now, even amongst women who were the strongest possible advocates of breastfeeding, this was seen as going too far. But while these kinds of women campaigners and these kinds of voices could spot an explicitly authoritarian law that would make impose some terrible restrictions on women in the name of babies, they completely missed the fact that there's a large raft of very explicit regulations which set out for women over here how they should be persuaded to use their breasts in a particular way. And some of them are set out in this document here, which I've spent the last few days going through. So what this document outlines, and it's the Department of Health's guidance notes on the infant formula and follow-on formula regulations 2007. It sounds very dull, and it is, by and large, but it's also really shocking, and it's something when I read it, every time I read this kind of thing, makes me angry, and I'll tell you why. So you might be surprised to know that infant formula for young babies cannot be advertised anywhere except in scientific publications or trade publications, where the intended readership of the publication is other than the general public. So you are not allowed to see adverts for baby formula milk. Secondly, this information cannot imply or create a belief that bottle feeding is equivalent or superior to breastfeeding. Thirdly, packets of formula have to avoid idealising the product, so they cannot include a picture of a baby. This is baby milk, remember. They cannot include pictures or text which imply that infant health, happiness or well-being, or the health, happiness and well-being of carers is associated with infant formula. So you can't show a pregnant woman or a nursing woman or anybody feeding a baby. These laws are an enforcement of the European Commission Directive, which in turn is enacting a 1981 WHO Code on the Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. And these directives are concerned to restrict advertising and the presentation of infant formula so as not to discourage breastfeeding. Now that makes me really cross. I don't really care about the representation of breasts in general, but this is a really concrete way in which women's minds are being played to, and men's minds, to try to steer us towards a particular interpretation of what breasts are for. So formula milk, in addition, can't be sold in multi-packs. It can't be part of loyalty card reward schemes. It can't be subject to markdowns or buy one, get one free offers, because although this is food for babies, which the vast majority of babies in Britain will need at some point and will be fed on regularly, it can only be sold at an inflated price. So explicitly, there are financial penalties for formula feeding over and above the penalty of just having to fork out £10 for a tub of formula milk. So while unlike in the United Arab Emirates, women's breasts are not physically commandeered by the state by granting babies rights over them, we are subject to so-called baby-friendly initiatives, which any health professional who we may turn to for advice with pregnancy, childbirth, or childcare, they are obliged to follow these guidelines. And so they have to preface any information about feeding to us with the message that breast is best. These are put forward by specific institutions with specific laws in ways that really do impact on us, in ways that actually we don't spot. Most people couldn't, we're a bit puzzled by why adverts on television for formula milk only show crawling babies. And they tend to show babies that are old. It's because they can't show infant milk for young babies on television. They can only show formula milk, which is for babies that are 6 months plus. So it always seems very strange to me that certain women's advocates seem to make a lot more noise, for example, in objecting to a single breastfeeding woman randomly being told by an old lady in a cafe that she should put her breasts away, or to Nigel Farage acknowledging that perhaps it would be nice if the feelings of older people who may feel a bit uncomfortable about public breastfeeding because of their ideas about modesty could be taken into consideration, than they do about the message that's given to all women when they're told by the full force of international institutions and their own government that they ought to get their breasts out for the good of their babies, to save the NHS money, to raise national IQ levels, and to solve problems of economic stagnation and every other social problem that's attributed to formula feeding. So why does this matter? First of all, I think it matters because we should be striving for men and women to make the freest possible choices and to make up their own minds about how they live their lives based on their own feelings, their own circumstances and their own relationships, not some faceless global criteria of optimal parenthood. And secondly, I think it goes beyond milk as a substance to the way in which we actually are supposed to interact with our children in a very private setting. So nowadays, the latest UNICEF advice says that women who do formula feed should hold the gaze of their baby as they're feeding, and that women should be the ones who primarily give the feeds, even if it's from a bottle. So all those possibilities of equality that are raised by the great progress of very safe formula milk are overridden by this presumption that some other kind of external authority, external to our own private lives, should somehow have the trump card when it comes to what meanings we should impose on our private beings.
Thanks, Jan. Okay, I'm going to come out to the audience in really, really quickly, but I just wanted brief, 30-second responses. First of all, I wanted to ask you, Laura, and you, Linda, what you think about Amy's contention that actually we need to make breasts much more boring, and in a way we're far too preoccupied with breasts.
I thought all of Amy's points were really interesting, but what you were saying about the mouth, it's the same with a hand or any other body part. It can have multi-functions, but it's breasts we seem to attribute this important sexual function to, when of course they can just exist and do nothing or have other functions. But I'm not sure that breasts can be boring or should be boring any more than any other part of our bodies is boring, because a certain amount of human peacocking is normal, and women, all of us can be attracted to attractive shapes on male and female bodies, and breasts can be part of that. I'm not really sure that they can or need to be boring just for us to feel comfortable in public with breastfeeding.
Yeah, I think the question is more strategy, because I really don't disagree with you at all, Amy, about the goal. And I think that is really the goal for the Free the Nipple, as I understand it, and I'm old, so it's limited, but in the U.S., I think that is the goal. I think what we could differ about the strategy, but I just think that I'm maybe more forgiving, because I think that tends to happen in social movements, is that you can have disagreements about strategy, and that you can have multiple voices. I mean, because we're in a situation that's already created, and as Jan really emphasized beautifully, that's already institutionally overdetermined. So then how do we move within that, because many people may not realize that, for example, up until about 1930 in the US, men's nipples were not supposed to show, like at the beach or at swimming pools, and I think now we'd probably agree that men's nipples are rather boring. So I think it's a question more of strategy, in which I'm more, I suppose, respectful, I guess, of different attempts, in that I'm not sure there is a perfect strategy in a very imperfect, contradictory, institutionally overdetermined setting.
Okay, I'm going to come out to the audience, but I would be very interested to know your thoughts on whether you think we've become too preoccupied with our bodies. Are we too body obsessed? Are we too breast and nipple obsessed? And would it be better to be thinking about something else? And also, is the government far too obsessed with our breasts, which is really Jan's proposition?
Personally for me, I just don't quite understand what in society, what clicked to make many of us feel embarrassed or feel that our breasts should be seen in a different way to men's chests. Was it due to male or female kind of views in society, or what? I mean, I don't understand, is it something to do with the fact that maybe we should see males' bodies as the normal? Because that seems slightly ridiculous, yet this kind of proposes that society does some deep down region. And also something similar, like when we come out of the shower and men wear towels exposing their top half. Is it because our breasts are seen as some sort of irresistible sex object? And if so, why has that arisen? I'm worried for my generation, because we are so, as you were saying, my views, we are so self-obsessed with what our cup size is, or what bra we're wearing today or something, just in the PE changing rooms. People can't seem to talk about anything else, and it's just ludicrous how they mean so much, yet kind of they shouldn't.
My question's kind of for Amy. Why would you argue against people using freedom of speech to support equality issues? Because as soon as you talk about sensationalising something and kind of show a fear for this, you're kind of showing yourself to be someone who has been conditioned to see the female body as sexual. And as soon as you put restrictions on people and say that campaigns such as Free the Nipple are risking being sensationalised, is it possible that you're then taking part in the sexualisation of women's bodies?
Hello, I've been following the work of a feminist by the name of Liana Kersner for a while, and she herself has rather a large chest and has been saying that she feels that, particularly in media and art criticism, there's been too many people saying that women, well, fictional women with large chests are inherently sexual or unrealistic. This is just a point I'd be interested to hear the panel debate. Thank you.
When I look at this debate, and I have looked at it very intensely as a woman who prolonged breastfed her own children, as a midwife who completed a PhD on the impact of infant feeding policy on women and healthcare practitioners, I feel that somewhere in all of the arguments and presentations that are here, what women really lack, what this is actually about, is power, and our lack of sense of power and self-determination that we think we have, but actually we don't, because that's why we're so obsessed with following whatever cultural or subcultural norms and values there are. And I think to bring up what you said, Ellie, about what the point that Jan made about why is the state so obsessed with it, I think they're obsessed with it because it's just a way of controlling women, and that's not what we're saying and debating. And I wonder if it's a bit of a distraction in a way. You know, this is a picture of my breast, and this is where I am and what I am, and just from that issue of we feel uncomfortable, despite the fact that we live in a Western culture that promotes equality through legislation and has done for over 30 years, we still somewhere feel disempowered.
I just wanted to respond to your comment, Jan, about the media censorship of formula advertising. You were saying that it makes you really angry that, for example, formula can't be reduced. But what else are we going to do when breastfeeding is more common among people in managerial and professional positions and less common in people in deprived areas? So don't we need to do something about that? You talked about, you know, not advertising formula, not showing newborns on formula, all these restrictions. But yet only 1% of women in the UK exclusively breastfeed at 6 months. It's only around 17% at 3 months. So clearly there's a huge imbalance between formula and breastfeeders. I don't feel like it's it's not a balanced argument. It's breastfeeders who get reprimanded in public, not bottle feeders. I'm currently feeding my toddler, and I've experienced a lot of negative reactions just from the public, and close friends, even my family, have made comments on it. So I don't see that. Obviously, there is criticism of formula as well, but I don't think it's equal. Do you see what I mean? It's not like.
Can I just ask you why you think it's a problem that women who aren't in managerial and professional jobs do more bottle feeding? Why does that concern you particularly?
Oh, I was linking it to the fact that formula is not allowed to be reduced in price. So the fact that lower earners might be...
But wouldn't it be better for them if it was cheaper then? If they have got less money?
But wouldn't it... Basically, what I'm saying is that people who earn a lot, it wouldn't really influence them whether to breastfeed or not. But if you're not earning very much and then you see formula is reduced, it might influence you more.
But why do you think people need to be influenced? I just can't quite understand why you're concerned about women from a certain sector of society.
I think there's a lot of negativity towards breastfeeding in general, and it's difficult for women to breastfeed and be accepted. So I think we need to encourage that, not discourage it.
Okay, I'll take some comments from the panel and then come back out. Do you want to start, Jan?
Well, I think it's really interesting that you struggle to answer the question, because why? Why does it bother you? Why would it bother you that some women are choosing to formula feed? It's because you don't think they're actually making a choice. So yeah, I think it's that.
Yeah, I don't think they're making a free decision. I think
no, because you think the formula.
Yeah. So, for example, when my baby was first born, some of my friends tried to convince me that I have to use some formula. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a widely held belief that you have to use at least some formula. It's better for the baby, it helps you sleep through the night, you won't have enough supply, etc. I feel like I face a lot of pressure.
Okay, but for lots of women that is actually true, yeah? It may not have been true for you, but it's actually true that formula will be a great help to them, and that it will help their baby sleep through the night, and it will be incredibly helpful, which is why I think women formula feed. Now, you can assume it's because they're brainwashed by formula milk adverts, which doesn't exist. But the thing is, you're problematising of it assumes that women are not making a free choice. They're making a choice because they're influenced by formula feeding advertising that doesn't actually exist because it's not allowed to exist, or it's because of their family. Now, their families are helping them, aren't they? You may not think that they're helping them, but that's the intention of their family. And they're basing it on quite a lot of experience, probably, of breastfeeding and formula feeding. And they will definitely have a more complicated, nuanced understanding of how babies should be fed than a health visitor, for example, or somebody who's got to give a line, which is breast is best. What most people do is they mix feed.
Yeah.
Now, the health visitor can't tell you that that's okay, because the line is that you've got to exclusively breastfeed to maintain milk supply, yeah? And that otherwise they'll suffer nipple confusion, blah, blah, blah. I think we've all got nipple confusion. But so there is a line that is there that we don't even spot that's there. And what it does is also it undermines the very real support that you will get from your family and friends. You can choose to disagree with it. Sorry, can I just make a point about heterophobia, okay? There is a huge amount going on here where people, your question, breasts are special because men don't have them, okay? We live in, by and large, a heterosexual society. Like it or not, that's the world you're going into. And a lot of it really like it, which is why we're heterosexual. Now, the difference between men and women is a source of great tension, which is really fantastic. Now, you can choose to be very scared of that and to want to eliminate it, or you can choose to relish it where it does exist and actually to go with the eroticisation of breasts because they're a bit special, in the same way that you might eroticize what men have that's a bit different to women. That's called heterosexuality. And there's something really good about that. And what's come out in the debates as part of this strand is this real fear of heterosexuality and a desire to eliminate it and to put other meanings of breasts, for example, of diseased breasts are good, heterosexual, sexy breasts are really bad. Breastfeeding breasts are really great, sexy breasts are really dangerous. I mean, it's just weird. Given what most of us do most of the time.
All right, Amy.
Okay, my one point might be to Jan then, and the advertising of formula. My issue with that is that I think women should receive information about formula, but it should not come from somebody who is profiting out of that choice. If formula companies didn't spend so much money on advertising and they weren't about profit, they could make formula a lot cheaper. If we had a generic, basic but really good product that women could have without all this competition between formula companies, it would probably be a lot cheaper for them. So I think women should receive information about formula if that is their informed choice to formula feed. But I don't think that that should be put in the hands of people who want to make a lot of profit. And for every, you know how much money formula companies spend on trying to get women to formula feed. And why do they need to do that if they're just offering the choice for babies?
So you think there should be state-provided formula?
Not necessarily state-provided, but something that is
okay with formula feeding.
Something that is, well, for women who need it. Babies need milk. If women choose not to or can't breastfeed, you can't put a 2-week-old baby on steak and chips. It needs the alternative, and formula saves lives in that way. But it's the advertising and the profit-making that I don't like.
Can I just ask you as well, you don't have to answer this now, but just so it's on the table, I was also wondering what an opinion might be about essentially Department of Health state advertising. I mean, they're employing Freuds to advertise the fact that they want women to do more public breastfeeding. So the Department of Health advertises breastfeeding, basically.
Right.
It's social markets breastfeeding. Okay. So, but not just hold that.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, because the woman over there hasn't had a response yet, and I had a few thoughts to your point, which I thought was really interesting, and it ties in with something you said as well. You said, why is it that a man just puts a towel around his waist, but women have to cover their breasts, and there's a lot of anxiety among young women about their breast size. So I've got a few points on that. Breasts are special. Men don't have them, and so heterosexual men may well fancy them. I think men with broad shoulders and muscly arms and facial hair are quite sexy too. But on the other hand, I don't think men should have to put a veil over their beard or wear long-sleeve shirts to hide their muscly arms. So although we fancy each other, it's women's bodies which are more policed than men. And of course, if you go back in time, we can see this as contestations over male property rights, because when women belonged to their husbands, how you behaved outside the home would be a reflection on the honour of the man that owned you. And I think we're still carrying quite ancient cultural legacies with us, even though we've got equality in so many ways. And then the other thing is, although art has often flattered women and men, Never before has the human image been so controlled. With the ubiquitous airbrush, even the models don't look like the models. So I think if I didn't feel like my breasts measured up, literally, when I was growing up, what with my Sam Fox cushion in the back of the car, I wonder how young people feel now, because no one's breasts look like the breasts in pictures, no one's bodies look like the bodies in pictures. So I do think that people are under more pressure than they've ever been to adhere to quite narrow ideals of beauty. Okay. I hope that answered everything that came up in your question.
Linda.
I guess I wanted to speak to the issue of inequality because from the U.S. perspective, this is what I find the most troubling and what my book At the Breast was primarily about. I think that too often we do become very preoccupied with issues that are primarily issues of privilege and extending our privilege. And now I do think women's bodies are more policed than men's, and I do think that's true, and that's part of long feminist struggles. And we certainly still live in societies with gender inequality. But at the same time, I think that we are moving lurchingly towards greater gender equality within social class groupings and within race groupings. And so it does trouble me that this becomes kind of taken over, like it distresses me to hear this woman up here saying, but again, I'm not as familiar with the context here in the UK as with the US, that, this is a problem of, lower income women, because again, who are we to make those decisions for them, as Jan has said? And there's always a strong presumption in the US in public health and in the medical practitioners that there's a kind of ignorance, that they need to be educated, that they need to be more educated. And actually it's pervasive. They know over and over and over again that they're supposed to be breastfeeding. But the thing that no one says is, what does this mean? It really means a lot of breast pumping. It's not really about breastfeeding and this wonderful, warm, embodied experience, which it can be really a good experience. I had a very good experience in many ways. But, on the other hand, I'm a very privileged person with a good income, partner who has a good income, a job that actually allows a lot of flexibility, a lot of privacy, but this is not most women's lives. I mean, there can just be even the needs of other people in the household and their own health, for example, all kinds of other concerns. Breastfeeding is not free either. Yeah. It is not free. And this is a real problem that we think it's free, because it takes energy, it takes calories. We all think of calories now as a bad thing, and it's a great thing that breastfeeding will make you lose weight. But, on the other hand, there is a point at which it's taking your time and your energy away from other forms of caregiving or paid work, which in many times in many family situations can be more important. For example, lone mother situations where perhaps the paid income is more important, or perhaps the needs of other children are more important, or perhaps even you're taking care of your own health is more important, because it does deplete your body. It's not free.
Okay, thank you, Linda. More questions?
I'd like to just say that as a mother myself of 3, and my biggest regret was I didn't breastfeed. When I had my children, my first, which is quite a long time ago now, it wasn't encouraged. That was then. Previous to that, my mother's generation, who had 5, all at home, that was just the norm. She breastfed every one of us. And I'm talking, little tiny tots, but we were all breastfed. So as I say, for me, my biggest regret as I matured was that I didn't. But my own daughter, who has breastfed both her children, and they went from breastfed straight then to eating. They didn't, there was no in between. She breastfed them both. And I was really, really proud of her, but envious too, because it is the most beautiful thing to see a child, but any any animal, they all breastfeed their young. You know, they don't bottle feed. We all breastfeed our young, so I don't see why there is this, and I think more now, society is more acceptance of, yes, you know, women do breastfeed, so why are we making, you know, why is society making such a big deal of it?
Although, to be fair, the children of other animals don't wear nappies, go to school. I mean,
No, they don't, no. But again...
We're not the same, are we?
Well, we're not the same,
No.
but they're not, you know, that's what we were given them for, primarily, for feeding.
Okay.
Personally, being bisexual myself, I don't think that males being topless is any less sexual than women being topless, because if I walk down the street and I see a man topless and he has a good body, I would think he was really attractive. But we don't see women walking around the streets with themselves being topless, which is just really unfair. And I just don't think it's right that men seem to have this ownership over how we want to present ourselves, and how the image of having like the perfect breasts has distorted our views so much that we can no longer feel comfortable with our own breasts on our cup size, and seeing all these pictures in like page 3, or like what we should look like and what we should aspire to be, is really it's just not realistic. And we shouldn't be just judged on our cup size. They're part of our bodies, so we should just be accepted.
We're definitely interested as well to know what people think of this contention, that part of the reason why people are getting concerned about this, or there's a certain level of stewing up about breasts and bodies, is to do with actually fears about sex and heterosexuality in particular.
Any bloke's going to speak as well?
That would be nice, yeah.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. Sort of, why are we so concerned about, why is this a political issue? Do you know what I mean? I feel like I've never really considered my identity in relation to my body before, and more I am being encouraged to do that. Like, I was invited to speak on a panel some months ago, and I was ill and I couldn't do it. And the organizers kind of said, "Oh, what a shame. We really, really wanted a female viewpoint." And I was like, oh, silly me, I thought you just wanted a viewpoint, and I happened to have a good one. But somehow my ideas were sort of related, my identity was related to my body, and I found that actually really insulting, and yet he had seen this as a very progressive thing. So I'm wondering, why are we being invited more and more to develop this sort of politics around our bodies, that it's not about just how you feed your child. You're making a political statement, and you're being invited to treat that as who you are.
Yeah, do you think it's okay to breastfeed in certain places in public, but not everywhere? For example, my friend works at the Soho House, and there was a complaint about a lady breastfeeding just in the afternoon. She was having cocktails. So they took her to a separate room, and she was actually very happy to sit in a separate room and do it while her friends stayed there and had cocktails. Do you think it's okay to breastfeed in Primark, but not breastfeed at Soho House?
I think it's worth being clear is that what we're talking about here is not women per se, but English and American women. In Germany, for example, breasts aren't really a bigger deal. Perhaps the state which some women are striving for with chest equality already exists in many countries. So I think it's worth examining our very English attitudes of many unwritten rules of what's taboo, etiquette, and maybe as a nation, as a culture, one day maybe less English and more liberal in what's permissible and not permissible, but I don't think that time's coming anytime soon.
Okay, I'm going to take quick comments. Do you want to start, Amy?
I would just completely agree with the idea that in the UK we have a particular obsession and interest with breasts, taking it with breastfeeding. You go to countries such as Sweden, which have much higher breastfeeding rates. They don't have a problem with breasts. It's just normal. It's boring. And the attitudes to whether a woman should breastfeed in public or not is not a question of public debate there. The vast majority of people just go, what? Yeah, of course. What are you talking about? But here, I mean, about 40% in surveys usually say, oh, no, she shouldn't. Why not? So yeah, it is very, very contextualised to the country.
Linda?
Yeah, I would just say also to the woman with the regrets, I wish you wouldn't feel that way, because I'm sure you had other lovely embodied experiences and intimacy with your children, and I'm not sure it's really so singular. It's very culturally dependent, as Amy just pointed, and this gentleman just pointed out. And in fact, going back historically, there's a great deal of evidence that we're always cultural, we're always enculturated, we always feed in culturally dependent ways, in ways that are highly artificial. And you look back and they're infant feeding vessels in many, many different cultures and traditions of all kinds of mixed animal and other kinds of herbal feedings and so on. So it's always probably very natural to humans to be very unnatural. In the US in particular, I found that these kind of evoking of animals and nature has very troubling meanings tied to race, because it's very fine for white women to feel proud of being like animals and nature, but we have white skin privilege, which in the US is huge, that if you are part of a group that has been subjugated for centuries because of your presumed closeness to nature and primitivity, then this is not something that you would perhaps want, and this needs to be much more understood and respected.
Jan?
Well, on the question of where should women breastfeed, well, I think in a way wherever they need to. But I think there's a real negotiation that needs to go on in any of these kind of situations that is about other people's sensibilities. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a person of a different generation with a different sensibility feeling uncomfortable around somebody else bearing their breasts when most people don't bear their breasts all the time. So the solution to this is not to get everybody bearing their breasts all the time to make breasts really normal, because that's not practical. It's extremely silly, and it makes breasts not special when they could be. And I think it's quite important that we preserve the kind of beauty of the breast, the idealisation of the breast, the eroticisation of the breast, because it serves us quite well, men and women. And there's something really quite human about that, not something that's male-owned or that's degraded or that's dirty that needs to be driven out. There's some very complicated reasons why human beings have created a specialness to the breast, whether that's just over here. I don't really care. It's over here for a reason. It's to do with human culture. So I think that there's this desire to flatten out and to kind of make boring things that human beings have made very exciting is a really, really strange and really quite depressing impulse. Somebody talked to me recently about the idea of fun sponges. And they weren't talking about breasts, they were talking about people who suck the joy out of life. And I think that there is a tendency for far too many people to want to suck the joy out of life. And whether that's by babies literally sucking the joy out of breasts because men no longer can go there because they're baby-owned, or whether that's people wanting to erase heterosexual sex and desire from the bits of life where it's got a really great place to be. That doesn't mean all the time, everywhere, but it is a really, really important thing. And I think if you seek to erase it, you're erasing something of our humanity, well, a huge part of our humanity.
Well, I think people should be able to breastfeed anywhere, and I don't think we should have to cater to a different generation's sensitivities. Because when babies need feeding, they need feeding. And I don't think I should have to cover up if I'm in Soho House compared to Primark. I don't think it really matters. Cultures do change. They change all the time. And talking about cultures being different, I think it was your point down there, in different countries, women being topless isn't really seen as a big deal. If you think about when the French explorers arrived in Tahiti, the women didn't wear anything on their tops, and the French explorers thought the women were very lascivious and up for sex straight away because they weren't used to seeing women's breasts. It caused quite a lot of trouble for the women of Tahiti because they weren't all lascivious and up for sex with the French explorers. And if you think about Pocahontas, she would have been topless. But you don't see topless Pocahontas in museums or in Disney films. We rewrite history to suit what's right for our culture. But yeah, in Scandinavia and in Germany and other European countries and in different times around the world and in pre-industrial societies, it's quite commonplace for women to be topless. And I don't think, we make different parts of the body special at different times and in different cultures. Foot binding was quite special in China once.
Okay. Last round of questions.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what strategy you think will bring about Free the Nipple and how you're actually going to do this, because it's all good having one day a year for your proposed topless day, I think it was, and having your social campaign, which will eventually hopefully get somewhere. But do you not think it would be better if you just not necessarily make women go around half naked where it's socially acceptable for men to do it, but like also enforce sort of not like a rule or anything to make sure that women have to do it, but do you not think it's just better and it will eventually make you free the nipple if more women just actually do it on the beach where it's socially acceptable for men to go around half naked?
So this all assumes that you think it's a good thing?
Yeah.
So why do you think it's a good thing?
Because it will stop eventually, hopefully, males to see that breasts are a sexual object.
So you don't think men should see breasts as sexual?
No, as in, not just for that. I think some males only think it is a sexual object, which is bad.
But for them it is, presumably. They're not going to feed from it. So.
Okay.
I find these sorts of debates really depressing because I don't think I've ever heard as banal a statement as chest equality. I see lots of people, lots of really intelligent people who are going places, who are doing great things, training to be doctors, lawyers, and women doing these things, who are so obsessed with something so banal, and it really pisses me off. Because it's are there not more important things in your life than what size your breasts are? Can you not just get over yourselves a little bit and go and do something interesting?
Okay.
Women aren't the only people that have breasts. Some men have breasts, some non-binary people have breasts. So basically, do you think a campaign such as Free the Nipple can be truly successful if it only focuses on cisgender women? Because imagine a non-binary person walking down the road without a top on and their breasts are out. They'd also face lots of transphobic kind of violence on top of that as well.
I have something very against what you just said, because you are implying that women are the ones that are making the choice to be obsessed about their breasts. And I don't think that we would like to think about them as much as we do, because if you think about men, yes, breasts are thought about a lot, and for example, men's genitals are thought about a lot, and men are allowed to publicly discuss, in the canteen, about their masturbation habits or about comparing sizes. But if women are discussing their breasts, they're usually discussing whether they're too big or whether their nipples are showing, and they're always adjusting their bras because men might be seeing them, and they're made to feel self-conscious about it. So I don't think that we would like to think about them. We would really like to leave them at home or I don't know. I would like to take them off, preferably. So I think it's just stupid to assume that it's our choice.
And can I just ask you, why do you think you're thinking about your breasts so much? I mean, why?
I think that it's...
If this is what you're doing.
People make me think about them a lot because it's a massive, lots of people have brought it up, that breast size is a big thing. That, if, for example, there's a group of boys and they tease you about having a small chest, you're meant to feel sorry about it, and someone else might be like, oh wow, that's a big insult to say that you have small breasts.
Can't you just tell them to F off? I mean...
Sorry?
Can't you just say to them, Anyway,
No, I'm not saying that I don't have the right to go against it. I'm just saying that it is an attitude. And so I cannot forget about it. Okay. As much as I personally don't care, I know that other people care.
I wanted to address your comment, Jan, how women's breasts are special and unique and should be appreciated as special and unique because they're not like men's, which particularly with reference to the US history speaking about earlier about how in the 30s, up until the 30s, men's chests weren't allowed. And do you not think that it's unfair to view women's breasts as special and unique because they're not like men's? And does that not sort of imply that men's bodies or traditional masculine bodies are standard and normal, and then women are weird and different and something to be considered separately?
I just wanted to talk about the conflict that seems to have arisen within this movement
between us as women. So I know that in the UK, and I'm assuming it's the same in America, the media we're surrounded with when we're growing up, kind of, it has resulted in the hypersexualization of women's breasts. And so we don't seem to see that, as that gentleman said, in France and Germany. We call them liberal, but they just don't see breasts as inherently sexual. They'd see breasts, they don't think sex, they'd think maybe breastfeeding, or, you know, as you said, that when you Google breast, you would see cancer. I mean, and you were mentioning about your own privilege and African American women, the differences over there, how perhaps a white American woman would be able to pose topless, she wouldn't be criticised, whereas at a Black Lives Matter rally a few months ago, they chose to pose topless, and within their own movement, we were criticising our own women. Like, how is there ever going to be progression if we can't accept that breasts aren't inherently sexual?
Okay.
And the US based group Femin, they always pose topless at their rallies, yet some women relish in modesty, and why can't we accept that?
That is a good question, actually, about some women also wanting to cover up.
You mentioned Tunisian woman, Femin, at the beginning. I would like to understand how breast can become a symbol of struggle for you.
Okay. All right, we'll go in the same order, I guess. So Linda, to start with, just last brief comments.
Women are getting on with it. We're getting on with it in lots of ways that are contradictory because we live in a contradictory, imperfect world. I think we try to have greater respect for different provocations and ways of moving forward, as well as in women who want to cover up. Yeah. Okay.
All right, Amy?
I think I kind of have a statement which is sort of a question as well, based on a few things people have just said. If men had breasts in the same way that women have breasts, if men could breastfeed, how would we be viewing all of this? Would there still be the same tensions, or would it just be accepted that we could all do what we wanted with our breasts? There's a joke on Facebook, you know, that if men could breastfeed, they wouldn't be sat in a coffee shop crying because someone has told them not to. They'd be having competitions about how far they can squirt their breast milk at the wall. But it's a serious point. How much of this is tied to gender and tied to power has been raised, or how much is actually just about the breast itself? If men could breastfeed, what would the world be like?
All right, Laura?
Okay, to the chap at the back, you're right, they are banal body parts. They, like I said at the beginning, they literally just sit on my chest doing nothing most of the time, except in our culture, they are hugely emblematic of motherhood, sexuality and femininity. That's the culture we live in. Because we flaunt them, because we conceal them, they're fetishised. Your point about Femin, well, women have used their bodies in political protest forever. From Lady Godiva to the women of the Niger Delta to Marianne, the symbol of French liberty, to Femin. It's nothing new, and I don't see it changing. Will Free the Nipple work? Probably not. In this country, it's pretty damn cold. But if I want to go topless on the beach, I will, and I would protest if it was illegal.
So men have penises. You may not realise this. Some of you women, I don't know whether you do. Men have penises, women have breasts. That's actually quite an exciting difference. And I would urge you to go out and actually figure out why that's exciting and what you can do with that difference rather than try to deny it or efface it or equalise it. It's ludicrous. Being different from men or being different from women is a really fun part of being a human being. So go out and enjoy it rather than trying to actually just become the same thing. You can't become the same thing. And otherwise what you're arguing for is that you develop a meaning of your own body by yourself, in your room, with a mirror, with a photographer or your own camera, with a selfie stick or whatever it takes to do it, rather than actually developing those meanings for yourselves by actually going out and getting naked with somebody in a private place.
Okay, let's thank our panel.